Hey, let's cover part three, and this is still working in the quadratics portion. Many of you will have learned this in school. In fact, I find that teachers really put a heavy emphasis on the quadratic formula when students are in school. In fact, many choose to use this over factoring, and it's not always the best option. It does always work, but again, it's not always the best option because there are faster methods to use. However, those of you who are moving on to college algebra trig, you need to understand this completely. Those of you who are moving on to stats and problem solving, this is this may be touched on, okay, just for specific pieces of the class. So let's get started. You already know that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This is an equation where it's a quadratic because of the x squared. So therefore, a can't be 0. Otherwise, then you wouldn't have the x squared. You would just have a line. We're going to use the formula x equals. Now, many students think it's just this, the negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. It's not. It's actually x equals all of that. And this is the quadratic formula. You use this when you can't factor in any other method, and it is an option for factoring, honestly, any quadratic. The quadratic formula is necessary to solve quadratic equations that are not factorable. So the first thing you need to do when you're doing the quadratic formula, make sure that your equation is listed from the highest exponent to the constant. It needs to be in order, because once it's in order, then you can find out what your A, your B, and your C are. And those are the coefficients of the variables. So A is the coefficient of x squared in this case, and I always like to label it. A is 1. B is the coefficient of x. So in this case, it is 8. And C is always the constant. The constant needs to be over here on this side with the rest of the terms, and it needs to be set equal to 0. These are just issues I've seen with students. All right, now we're just going to do plug and chug. Now that we know what these are, we're just going to substitute them in for this equation. So x equals negative, that's a negative, b is 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, put it in parentheses, 8 squared minus 4, a is 1, c is 15. And here's another thing that students get wrong a lot. They think it's just over the line is underneath the square root. It is not. It is underneath the entire piece. And then 2 times a. Make sure that you understand the setup. We're just substituting the coefficients for what's in the formula. Now we're going to simplify. X equals, please carry this down with you, negative 8 plus or minus the square root. 8 squared is 64. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 15 is negative 60. All of that over 2 times 1, which is 2. Continue simplifying. 64 minus 60 is 4. All of this is over 2. And then the last step for this piece is x equals negative 8 plus or minus, okay, the square root of 4. I don't know where my calculator is, otherwise I would show you. You should be able to hit, I think if you're using TIX, the X2S, second key, and then I think it's the X squared button. And I'm so sorry, I don't have my calculator. All right. So you're going to use the second key and then the X squared button. The X8s, I can't remember exactly where it is. I'd have to look. So let me know if you need help with that. The square root of 4 is 2 because 2 times 2 is 4 over 2. Now here's where we're going to break this into two different pieces. X is equal to negative 8 plus 2 over 2, and X is equal to negative 8 minus 2 over 2. We're going to have two different answers, as we should, because the highest exponent is 2. So let's just finish these out. Negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6 over 2 is negative 3. So, x equals negative 3. And negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10 over 2, which is negative 5. So x equals negative 5. The answers are not -3 and -5. The answers are x equals -3 and x equals -5. I'm not going to get into too much issues with that. You just need to understand that's the case. Before I do fractions, because I know how much you love fractions. And you know what? Let's just do it. Let's just do it because I've shown you how to get rid of the fraction piece, right? So, I mean, we could go through and set this up, x equals -b. We could do all of that with the fractions, but none of you want to do that. So let's get rid of the fractions. First thing you need to do is what's the lowest common denominator, which means what number with the lowest number that 6 divides into, 2 divides into, and 3 divides into. And that is 6. 6 divides into 6 once, 2 divides into 6 3 times, 3 divides into 6 twice. So our lowest common denominator is 6. We're going to multiply 6 times every stinking one of these terms. Remember, you can only do this. We're doing it on this side too, so I'll just do it. You have to do it to everything. What you need to understand is learn this, and you can only do this when there's an equal sign. You can't do it if it's just an expression and there's no equal sign. So 6 divided by 6 is 1. I'm not skipping steps. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And 6 times 0 is 0. All right, let's multiply these. X squared minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. Now we can use our quadratic formula. All right, A is 1, B is -3, and C is 2. Now we just substitute. -3, because -b, plus or minus the square root of b squared, put it in parentheses, minus 4ac. All of this is over 2 times a. Negative times a negative is +3. -3 squared is +9. 4 times 2 is, so that's -8. Nine minus 8 is 1. The square root of 1 is 1. Now we break it into 2. 3 plus 1 over 2. 3 minus 1 over 2. 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 over 2 is 2. 3 minus 1 is 2. 2 over 2 is 1. Let me know what questions you have. All right. This is a perfect situation where we do not have it set equal to 0, and it needs to be in order from the highest exponent to the constant. So we're going to have to add 3 to both sides to make sure that this is set equal to 0. Now find your A, B, and C. Plug and chug. -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. All of this is over 2 times a. Let's simplify. 8 squared is 64. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 times 3 is 60. 2 times 5 is 10. 64 minus 60 is 4. All over 10. Square root of 4 is 2 over 10. All right, let's break it up. -8 plus 2 over 10. -8 minus 2 over 10. Don't skip this step. Don't just go at it and just start solving it. I can't tell you how many mistakes happen. Be careful. Do not skip steps. So -8 plus 2 is -6 over 10. We just need to reduce this by 2. So -3/5. -8 minus 2 is -10 over 10, which is -1. Okay, for this next one, maybe you should try this one yourself. I think that would be a good idea. Actually, let me see how this one ends up. Yeah, I think this would be a good one for you to try for yourself. So attempt this one. There will be a point where you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do here? And that's okay. That's when learning happens. So attempt it yourself and then come back to see how you did. They're already set equal to 0, and they are in order from highest exponent to constant. So A equals 1, B equals -4, and C equals 1. So negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC, all of that over 2 times A. Negative times a negative is a positive 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. Minus 4 over 2. 4 plus or minus the square root of 12 over 2. Now, many of you are going to be like, okay, how do I take the square root of 12? It's going to be a decimal, and so we're not going to do it. I do not want decimals on your answers. For those of you who are moving on to problem solving or statistics, you're done. Put a box around that, you're done. Please do not reduce this 4 over 2. You can't do that. All 3 terms have to be reduced, or you have to separate them, which I can show you that as well here in just a minute if you just hang out with me. Those of you moving on to college algebra trig need to understand this piece. Square root of 12, and I only want to talk about the square root of 12. 12 has a perfect square in it. A perfect square means you take the square root of it and there's no decimal. And that perfect square is 4. It's made up of 4 times 3. Well, you can write this as square root of 4, square root of 3, to where when you take the square root of 4, it is 2, and you're left with the square root of 3. And that's what we're going to do for the square root of 12 piece. Let's come up here. College algebra trig students need to know this. So 4 plus or minus, I'm going to bring my 2 square root of 3 that I just did over 2. Here's what I do whenever I separate these, because I am going to separate these because they can be reduced. Actually, we don't even need to separate them if we're going to be honest. We can just do this. 4 over 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 3 over 2. So when you do that, you can see that 4 over 2 is 2, plus or minus these reduce, and you're left with square root of 3. Notice I didn't go 4 over 2 and just go to 2. You have to be able to reduce both. These are 2 separate pieces. They're just sharing the same denominator. If you have any questions about that, especially moving on to 1590, please discuss this with me. All right. Attempt this next one yourself. Let's see where you get, how far you get. It's the only thing you can do to make sure you understand this. You might have to leave it with the square root in it, so just be careful. Make sure everything is on the same side, that you've got them in order. Find your A, B, and C, and then substitute into your quadratic right here. And then simplify as much as you can. All right. Pause the video and attempt it yourself. First thing I need to do here is move that 5x over. Okay, A is 1, B is -5, and C is -10. Now let's substitute. Negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC, and all of this is over 2 times A. Negative and negative is +5. -5 squared is 25. -4 times 1 is -4. -4 times -10 is +40. And then x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 65 over 2. There is no perfect square in 65. We're done. No matter which class you're moving on to, you're done. I do not want decimals. I won't grade those because I'm specifically asking you to solve it properly. In math, you do not want to have the approximate number. We want the exact, and this is exact. All right. The next one, attempt it yourself. Same concept, attempt it yourself and see how far you get. Make sure everything's on the same side, equal to 0. So with that being said, pause the video, attempt this yourself, and come back to see how you did. I'm going to add 4x and subtract 5 from both sides. All right, my A is 2, B is 4, C is -5. Substitute x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of that over 2 times a. Let's simplify. -4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared is 16. -4 times 2 is -8. -8 times -5 is +40. 2 times 2 is 4. All right, so let's simplify that. -4 plus or minus the square root of 56 over 4. All right, for those of you who are not moving on to college algebra trig, put a box around that. You're done. Those of you who are moving on to 1590, the college algebra trig, you need to make sure and take that square root of 56 and find that perfect square that's in there. There's actually a couple, but we want, well, no, there's just one. It's 4. It wouldn't be 2. You can't take the square root of 2 and get an integer, but you can for 4. Square root of 4 is 2. So square root of 4 and the square root of 14 is what makes up 56. The square root of 4 is 2. So this would be written as x equals -4. I'm going to go ahead and put it over 4 plus or minus 2 square root of 14 over 4, because now I can reduce it. This reduces to -1 plus or minus square root of 14 over 2. Those of you moving on to 1590 need to understand this piece. If you do not, let's talk. If you don't know your multiplication skills, this is going to be hard. You're going to need to maybe make a list of some of the perfect squares, like 4, 2 squares 4, 3 squares 9, 4 squares 16, 5 squares 25. Those are what you need to know are perfect squares, because then when you're going through and you're finding out, there's other ways to do it. So if you're struggling with that, let me know and I can help you. All right. The next one. Pause the video, attempt it yourself, make sure you've got everything you need for it. This one's going to be a little weird. It's okay. It's just another chance to learn something new. Set it equal to 0 and come back to see how you did. I'm going to start by subtracting 4x and adding 2 to both sides. Setting it equal to 0. A is 3. B is -4. C is 2. Let's substitute. X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all that over 2 times a. Negative is 4 plus or minus the square root of -4 squared is 16. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. Should not go over to x. And then 4 plus or minus the square root of, okay, 16 minus 24 is -8. And all of this is over 6. Now, for those of you moving on to college algebra and trig, there is more we can do here, but I'm not going to do it because that's something you'll learn in the next class. For all of you, you're done. This is not the answer. It is, but it actually can be simplified more. But what you would say here, if you get a negative under the radical, negative number under the square root, try it. Put it in your calculator. You're going to get syntax error, does not exist. So that's what you're going to write on My Open Math. You're going to write DNE, or you're going to write no real solutions, whatever mom's looking for. Same thing for me. You can write DNE, no real solutions. Now, on your exam, if you just go through and you see this and you tell me DNE, no real solutions, and it's right, you'll get 1 point for maybe a 5 or 6 point question. you have to show your work to prove that it's no real solutions. All right, just understand that anytime you just give me an answer to any problem and it happens to be right, you'll get 1 point, because in math you have to show your work. All right, a couple more questions. Attempt this next one yourself. See how you do. This one's going to work. Those of you who are in going on to 1590 college algebra, make sure you go as far as you can go. The rest of you, once you hit to the point where you've got a square root of a number that's not a perfect square, put a box around it, you're done. Okay, pause the video and come back to see how you did. This one's already set up for us. A is 1, B is -12, and C is 30. Oh, it's not set up for us. I'm so sorry. I thought that was a 0. I'm wearing my glasses too. So x squared minus 12x plus, is that 28? 28 is 0. All right, so 1, -12, and 28. Let's substitute. X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. All of that is over 2 times a. So 12 plus or minus the square root of -12 squared is 144. 28 times 4 is 112. So minus 112 over 2. (144 minus 112 is 32, and all of this is over 2. Those of you who are going to problem solving and statistics, you're done. Those of you who are moving on to college algebra trig, you're not. Now, when you're taking the exam, I'm not grading this as though you're moving on to whichever class. For all of you, this is my bare minimum expectation for your exam. If you move further, that's fine, but this is the answer I'm looking for. The rest of you who are moving on to college algebra trig, this next piece is just something you need to know to be successful in that class. It doesn't mean don't do it. It means make sure you understand it. So if you are moving on, I would hope that you would continue so that I can give you feedback. I'm not going to put a grade on the rest of it. I'm not going to count it against you. But if you're doing something wrong, I can help you by guiding you into the correct way to go. All right, so those of you moving on, square root of 32 does have a perfect square in it. It's 16. Square root of 16 and square root of 2. So square root of 16 is 4. So this answer for square root of 32 would be 4 square root of 2. So x equals 12 plus or minus 4 square root of 2. All of this is over, I should do them individually, over 2 for each of them. Let's just get rid of this space here. All right, x equals 12 over 2 is 6, plus or minus, this reduces to 2, square root of 2. Again, those of you moving on to problem solving stats do not need to know this. You need to make sure you know that. Ooh, this one looks fun. Go ahead and pause the video, attempt this one yourself, and then come back to see how you did. All right, before we can do anything, we've got to distribute that 2x over this binomial. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 4 is 8x. Let's move everything to the left side so that we can get it equal to 0. Minus 3x plus 3. 2x squared plus 5x plus 3 equals 0. A is 2. B is 5, and C is 3. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. All of that over is 2 times a. I do not expect you to have this memorized, no matter which class you're moving on to. Okay. All right. Negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared is 25. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. Square root of 25 minus, 25 minus 24 is 1. Not skipping steps. Square root of 1 is 1. Now we break this into 2 different pieces. X equals negative 5 plus 1 over 4. and x equals -5 minus 1 over 4. Get our two answers. -5 plus 1 is -4 over 4, which is -1. And -5 minus 1 is -6 over 4. We need to reduce these both by 2 is -3/2. That's it. I'll see you in the next video. Let me know what questions you have.